The large circular chamber buzzed with excitement. Today was a historic day for humanity. Earth had finally been invited to join the Galactic Council after decades of distant observation by alien civilizations. The room glowed with soft blue light that reflected off the polished stone walls. Creatures of all shapes and sizes filled the seats that rose in tiers around the central platform. Ethan Hayes stood quietly at the edge of the human delegation. At 42, the retired military medic hadn't expected to be chosen for this mission. His gray-streaked dark hair and the slight limp from an old battlefield injury made him feel out of place among the diplomats and scientists. Yet the selection committee had insisted that the delegation should represent all aspects of humanity, including their medical practices and resilience. "Humans of Earth," announced the council speaker, a tall being with 6 slender arms and skin that shifted colors like an opal. "We welcome you to the Galactic Council chambers. Today begins your journey toward potential membership." The human ambassador stepped forward with practiced grace to give her speech. Ethan watched the aliens' reactions. Some leaned forward with curiosity. Others whispered to each other behind strange appendages. 3 species in particular seemed to be studying the humans with special interest. After the formal speeches ended, the mingling began. Ethan found himself approached by a group of 3 aliens. "Greetings, human. I am Ambassador Krell of the Cerevian Dominion," said a being with thick gray skin that looked like stone. His voice rumbled like distant thunder. "How old are you, if I may ask?" "I'm 42, Ethan replied with a polite smile. The alien's crystalline eyes widened. "So young. You have barely begun to live." He turned to his companions. "The humans typically survive only 80 to 100 orbits of their star. Isn't that fascinating?" A willowy creature with luminescent skin nodded. "I am Senna of the Luxaran Collective. Our people regularly live to see 450 years pass. How do you accomplish anything meaningful in such a brief existence?" Ethan maintained his smile despite the condescending tone. "We managed to stay busy." The third alien, wearing an elaborate uniform with metal plating that seemed to be part of its body, made a sound like grinding gears. "High Commander Drez of the Voltar Empire. Our warriors routinely serve for 300 years, before even reaching middle age. Our eldest have seen over 600 years. "That's impressive," Ethan said honestly. Ambassador Krell placed a heavy hand on Ethan's shoulder. "You must find it terrifying, knowing your time is so limited. The tragedy of your species is that you will never experience the true depth of wisdom that comes with centuries of life." "We make do with what we have," Ethan replied, his voice steady. The aliens exchanged glances that clearly communicated pity. "Your bravery in the face of such a brief existence is commendable," Senna said, her voice soft like chiming bells. "Your species continues despite knowing you will all perish so quickly." High Commander Drez nodded stiffly. "It explains your reckless expansion and hurried technology development. You rush because you must." Ethan listened as the aliens continued to discuss human lifespan as if it were a terrible disease. He didn't correct them or argue. Years of military service had taught him when to speak and when to observe. Right now, observation seemed the wiser choice. "Perhaps that is why they fight so many wars," Ambassador Krell suggested to his companions. "Their brief lives make them value individual existence less. Or perhaps it makes us value every moment more," Ethan finally said, his voice quiet but firm. The aliens fell silent, studying him with newfound curiosity. "An interesting perspective," Senna admitted after a pause. "Though one born of necessity, I suppose." As the conversation shifted to diplomatic matters, Ethan merely smiled. The aliens had no idea what humans had endured to reach the stars. Their condescension didn't bother him. After surviving 2 bouts of cancer and countless battlefield injuries, he had learned that underestimation could be a powerful advantage. Let them believe humans were fragile and fleeting. They would learn the truth soon enough. 3 days after their arrival, the human delegation attended a formal dinner with members of the Galactic Council. The massive dining hall sparkled with strange crystals that floated in the air, providing both light and gentle music when they touched each other. Ethan sat at a table with several aliens he hadn't met before. He ate carefully, using the special utensils designed for human hands. The food was safe for humans, but tasted odd. Sweet things were salty, sour things were bitter. "You adapt quickly to our eating tools," said the alien across from him. This creature had smooth blue skin and 4 eyes arranged in a diamond pattern. "I am Dr. Orlin, physician to the council members." "Nice to meet you. I'm Ethan Hayes." "What is your function in your delegation, Ethan Hayes?" "I was a military medic for 20 years. Now I'm retired, but they wanted someone with medical experience for the delegation." All 4 of Dr. Orlin's eyes blinked at once. "You were a healer for your warriors." "Yes, I treated injuries and illnesses in combat zones." "How fascinating." Dr. Orlin leaned forward. "Human medicine must be quite advanced to keep your people alive despite your short lifespans." Ethan took a sip of water. "We do our best. Though I'm curious, what kind of medical challenges do your people face when they live hundreds of years?" Dr. Orlin seemed surprised by the question. "Most species experience 1 or 2 major health crises in their lifetime. The first usually comes in middle age, around 200 years for my people. The second typically arrives near the end of life. Only 1 or 2. Ethan couldn't hide his surprise. "Is that unusual for humans?" Ethan laughed softly. "Very. I've had cancer twice myself. Broke 6 different bones throughout my life. Had pneumonia 3 times. That's not counting battlefield injuries." The alien's 4 eyes widened dramatically. "And you survived all these things in only 42 years. "I did. That's not particularly unusual for humans. My grandfather lived to 94 despite having heart surgery twice and surviving a major stroke." The conversation at the table had stopped. The other aliens were now listening intently. "What is this cancer you survived twice?" asked a Luxaran at the far end of the table. "It's when cells in your body start multiplying out of control," Ethan explained simply. "They form tumors that can spread throughout the body if not treated. And this happened to you twice." Dr. Orlin sounded horrified. "In most species, such cellular rebellion happens only once, if ever, and is generally fatal." Ethan shrugged. "We've gotten pretty good at treating it. I had surgery and radiation the first time. Chemotherapy the second." "Radiation. You deliberately expose your body to radiation." A Voltar officer who had been quiet until now almost shouted the question. "Controlled amounts, yes. It kills the cancer cells. But it must damage healthy cells as well," said Dr. Orlin. "It does. They recover eventually. The body heals." A murmur of astonishment swept around the table. Dr. Orlin's skin had paled to a lighter blue. "Human, I would very much like to see your medical records, if that would be permitted," the doctor said finally. "I don't see why not." Senna, the Luxaran he'd met on the first day, had been sitting silently at the end of the table. Now she spoke up. "I am a biological researcher. Would you permit me to analyze these records as well?" Ethan nodded. "Sure. Though I should warn you, my medical history isn't even that impressive by human standards." The next morning, Ethan provided access to his full medical history. By afternoon, a small team of alien scientists had gathered in a conference room, staring at holographic displays of his records with expressions that ranged from shock to disbelief. "This can't possibly be correct," Dr. Orlin said, pointing at a scan of Ethan's healed ribs. "These bones were completely shattered 5 years ago." "War injury," Ethan explained. "An explosion. And they simply grew back together. With some surgical help and physical therapy, yes." Senna was reviewing his cancer treatments. "Your cells were poisoned deliberately, and yet they recovered." "That's how chemotherapy works," Ethan said. "It's rough, but effective." The aliens exchanged troubled glances. Their understanding of what it meant to be alive was beginning to shift. Word of Ethan's unusual medical history spread quickly through the Galactic Council. 1 week later, another human arrived at the station. Dr. Lyra Monroe stepped off the transport ship with confident strides. At 38, she was one of Earth's leading xenobiologists, a woman who had dedicated her life to understanding alien life forms. "Ethan Hayes," she asked, spotting him in the arrival area. "I'm Lyra Monroe. Earth Command sent me to help with this research project that's apparently causing quite a stir." Ethan shook her hand. "Nice to meet you. And yes, the aliens are very interested in our medical histories. So I've heard. They've never met a species that gets sick as often as we do in lives to tell about it." Dr. Orlin had arranged a proper research laboratory for their use. When Ethan and Lyra arrived, they found the room already filled with alien scientists from 6 different species. "Dr. Monroe," Orlin greeted her, all 4 eyes blinking in sequence. "We are honored by your presence. Your reputation in xenobiology is known even here." Lyra smiled. "I'm eager to work with all of you. I understand you're interested in human resilience." "Interested is an understatement," said Senna, her luminescent skin glowing slightly brighter with excitement. "We have begun reviewing the medical histories of your delegation members. The data is challenging our understanding of biology." Lyra nodded. "I've brought additional human medical data for our comparative study." Over the next few days, humans and aliens worked side by side, analyzing differences in how their bodies responded to damage and disease. Lyra set up clear demonstrations that even the non-scientists could understand. "Look at these cells," she said one afternoon, pointing to a large screen that showed microscopic images. "The left side shows human skin cells after minor damage. The right shows the equivalent cerevian cells." Everyone could see the difference. The human cells were already multiplying rapidly, filling in the damaged area. The cerevian cells were changing much more slowly. "Humans heal approximately 15 times faster than cerevians," Lyra explained. "But cerevian cells make fewer mistakes during repair." Ambassador Krell, who had come to observe, touched his stone-like skin thoughtfully. "So we heal more perfectly, but much slower." "Exactly," Lyra said. "Human healing is fast but imperfect. We prioritize speed over perfection." Ethan, who had been reviewing data at another station, spoke up. "I think I understand now. Your species live longer because you avoid damage. Humans live shorter lives but experience more healing events." Dr. Orlin's skin had turned a deep blue, which Ethan had learned meant deep thought. "It is as if human bodies are in constant war with their environment." "That's a good way to put it," Lyra agreed. "Human bodies are built to take damage and recover quickly over and over. Your bodies are built to avoid damage and recover perfectly, but slowly." A young Voltar scientist named Grax, who had joined the research team, pulled up a new data set. "According to my calculations, the average human experiences and recovers from more injuries by age 30 than most of our species do in our entire lives." The room grew quiet as everyone considered this information. "May I see Ethan's brain scans again?" asked Senna suddenly. Lyra pulled them up on the main screen. The aliens stared at the images. "These dark spots," Senna said, pointing to several areas. "These are all healed injuries." "Yes," Ethan confirmed. "Concussions from combat. 3 of them." "And you still function normally?" asked Ambassador Krell. "I get headaches sometimes, but yes." Senna turned to her fellow researchers. "In my species, a single brain injury of this magnitude would be permanently disabling. 3 would be fatal." High Commander Drez, who rarely attended these sessions, stood in the back of the room with his arms crossed. For the first time since Ethan had met him, the commander looked uncertain. "Your data suggests," Drez said slowly, "that humans experience more physical hardship in 1 century than we Voltar do in 6. "That's what the numbers show," Lyra confirmed. Ethan could see the aliens processing this information. Their understanding of what made a species successful was visibly shifting before his eyes. Length of life, they were beginning to realize, was only one measure of a life well lived. 2 weeks into the research project, alarms blared throughout the Galactic Council station. Red lights flashed in every corridor. Ethan awoke from sleep, instantly alert from years of military training. His communication device buzzed with an emergency message. All medical personnel report to Level 8 immediately. Ethan dressed quickly and rushed to the designated level. When he arrived, he found chaos. Aliens of various species crowded the medical bay. Some lay on beds, clearly ill. Others moved about in panic. Lyra spotted him and hurried over. There's some kind of outbreak. It started in the ventilation system of the diplomatic quarters. Dr. Orlin approached, his blue skin now pale gray with stress. We have a crisis. A viral pathogen has spread through the station. Many council members are already showing symptoms. What kind of virus? Ethan asked. Unknown. It appears to affect most oxygen-breathing species, Dr. Orlin explained. Our medical systems are overwhelmed. High Commander Drez stood nearby, barking orders to his staff. Despite his commanding presence, Ethan could see fear in the commander's eyes. How can we help? Lyra asked. Your species seems to be affected less severely than others, Dr. Orlin said. Some humans show mild symptoms, but none have become critically ill. Ethan nodded. We're used to viral outbreaks. Our bodies have dealt with thousands of them over our history. Ambassador Krell approached, looking unwell. 3 council members are already in critical condition. Our medical technology cannot adapt quickly enough to this new threat. Ethan thought for a moment, then turned to Lyra. We should contact Earth. Have them send a medical team specialized in viral outbreaks. Good idea, she agreed. Until then, we can help organize treatment based on Earth protocols. Over the next few hours, Ethan fell back on his military medic training. He helped set up a proper quarantine area and began checking patients systematically. Lyra worked with the alien doctors to analyze the virus. It's similar to a respiratory virus from Earth, she explained during a brief meeting. Not identical, but close enough that our immune systems recognize it. Can you create a treatment? Asked Dr. Orlin. We're working on it. In the meantime, we need to separate patients by species and symptom severity. By the end of the first day, Ethan felt a tickle in his throat and developed a slight fever. He had caught the virus, but he kept working. When Dr. Orlin noticed his symptoms, the alien was shocked. You are infected. You must rest immediately. Ethan shook his head. I can still work. This is mild for me. But the infection. My body is fighting it while I work, Ethan explained. This isn't the first time I've worked through illness. The aliens watched in amazement as human medical staff continued to function despite catching the virus. Their own medical personnel who caught even a mild case were completely incapacitated. On the 3rd day of the crisis, a ship arrived from Earth carrying specialized medical equipment and treatments. Dr. Kai Singh, a virologist, led the team. We've developed an antiviral treatment that should help, Dr. Singh explained as his team unloaded supplies. It's based on treatments for similar Earth viruses. Ethan, now recovering from his own bout with the virus, helped administer the treatments. The Voltar, with their proud warrior culture, were particularly resistant to accepting help. Your medicine cannot possibly be compatible with our biology, High Commander Drez argued, though he could barely stand. We've modified it based on the data Lyra collected, Ethan explained patiently. It's your best chance. Reluctantly, Drez accepted the treatment. Within hours, his condition improved. By the end of the week, the crisis was under control. The human medical team had successfully treated over 200 alien patients. In the Emergency Operations Center, Ambassador Krell approached Ethan. Your people fought this disease as if you had seen it before. We've fought thousands like it, Ethan replied simply. Pandemics, epidemics, outbreaks, they're part of human history. The ambassador's crystalline eyes studied Ethan with new respect. "Perhaps," he said quietly, "there is more than one way to measure the strength of a species." After the virus was contained, the Galactic Council called a special meeting. The large chamber was not as crowded as usual. Many members were still recovering from the illness. Those who attended sat further apart, a new caution evident in their behavior. Ethan and Lyra sat with the human delegation. The Earth ambassador had asked them to be present to answer any medical questions. Dr. Singh and his medical team had returned to Earth after ensuring the crisis was truly over. The council speaker called the meeting to order. "We gather today to discuss the recent health crisis and its implications. Never before has an illness spread so quickly through our station. Without the assistance of our human guests, the outcome would have been far worse." High Commander Dres stood. His normally imposing figure seemed slightly diminished after his illness, but his voice remained strong. "The Council must acknowledge that the humans' response to this crisis revealed something important about their species, something we failed to recognize." Ethan listened carefully. The commander had been one of the most dismissive of humans when they first arrived. The humans continued to function while infected. Dres continued. "Their bodies fought the virus even as they worked to save us. This resilience deserves our respect." Ambassador Krell rose next. "I propose we formally recognize the human medical team's contribution and establish a permanent exchange of medical knowledge between Earth and Council species." There were murmurs of agreement throughout the chamber. The Council speaker nodded. "We shall take a vote on this proposal shortly. But first, I invite Ethan Hayes to address the Council regarding what we have learned." Surprised, Ethan walked to the central platform. He wasn't used to formal speeches, but he knew what needed to be said. "Thank you for this opportunity," he began. "During the crisis, we provided each affected species with data showing how their bodies responded to the virus. I'd like to explain what that data means." He activated the display system, showing medical scans side by side. "This first image shows a Voltar warrior's immune response to the virus," Ethan explained. "You can see that it's slow but precise. The second image shows a human immune response, faster but less targeted." He switched to a new set of images. "This shows cerevian tissue healing after the virus damaged it. The healing is perfect, but takes weeks. Human tissue," he pointed to the comparison image, "heals imperfectly, but within days." Lyra joined him at the platform. "What Ethan is showing you is the fundamental difference in our evolutionary paths," she added. "Your species evolved in environments that changed slowly, allowing for perfect adaptation over time. Humans evolved in rapidly changing environments that required quick responses, even if imperfect." A young Voltar scientist named Grax spoke up from the audience. "Are you suggesting that our long lives might actually be a limitation in certain circumstances?" The chamber grew quiet. This question challenged the core belief of many council species that their extended lifespans were proof of their evolutionary superiority. "Not a limitation," Ethan said carefully. "Just a different approach. On Earth, we have a saying, 'What doesn't kill you makes you stronger.' Our bodies are designed to be challenged and to recover." Ambassador Krell frowned. "This concept is troubling. We have built our societies around preserving life through avoiding harm. You suggest embracing harm for the sake of resilience." "Not embracing harm," Lyra clarified, "but not fearing it either. Humans know we will face illness, injury, and hardship. We expect it and prepare for it." An older Luxaran counselor stood slowly. "I have lived for 423 years, she said, her voice thin but clear. "In all that time, I have experienced 3 serious illnesses. The virus this week was my 4th. A human of merely 40 years might have experienced dozens." "That's right," Ethan confirmed. "Then perhaps," the elder Luxaran said, "we have been measuring advancement incorrectly. Perhaps it is not how long one avoids suffering that matters, but how one responds to it when it comes." The council chamber buzzed with conversation as species that had prided themselves on their longevity began to reconsider what made a species truly resilient. 6 months passed since the viral outbreak. Ethan walked through the medical wing of the Galactic Council station, now permanently expanded to include a human section. Doctors and researchers from Earth worked alongside alien medical staff, sharing knowledge that was changing healthcare throughout the council species. Ethan, Dr. Orlan called, waving him over to a treatment room. Come see the results of our new therapy. Inside, a young Cerevian sat on an examination table. Unlike the stone-like gray skin of most Cerevians, patches of his skin showed a slightly different texture. This is Trell, Ambassador Krell's son, Dr. Orlan explained. He volunteered for our controlled exposure program. Ethan nodded in greeting. How are you feeling, Trell? Strange, the young Cerevian admitted, but stronger. The minor skin infection was uncomfortable, but my body defeated it in only 12 days instead of the usual 30. Dr. Orlan's blue skin glowed with excitement. We're carefully exposing volunteers to controlled amounts of non-lethal pathogens to stimulate their immune systems. The results are remarkable. Recovery times have decreased by more than half. This was just one of many programs that had developed from the human-alien research. After the council meeting, a formal medical exchange had been established. Lyra had been appointed as the lead human researcher, working with teams across multiple species. Ambassador Krell approved his son's participation. Ethan asked, knowing how protective the older Cerevian had been. It took some convincing. Trell said with what Ethan recognized as a Cerevian smile, a slight shimmer in the crystalline eyes. But after seeing how the humans fought off the virus, he became curious about strengthening our people. Later that day, Ethan met Lyra for lunch in the station's central garden. Earth plants now grew alongside alien vegetation, creating an interesting mix of colors and scents. How's the Voltar warrior training program going? He asked as they found a quiet spot to sit. Lyra smiled. Better than expected. High Commander Drez was skeptical about introducing controlled injuries during training, but the younger warriors are healing faster with each session. Their bodies are learning to respond more quickly. And the opposition? Ethan asked. Lyra's smile faded slightly. Still vocal, especially among the older generations. Not all council species had embraced the human approach to health. Many traditionalists argued that deliberately exposing themselves to harm went against thousands of years of their cultural development. Some called it dangerous human influence and demanded a return to the old ways. It's natural, Ethan said. Change is hard, especially when it challenges core beliefs. Their conversation was interrupted when Senna approached their table, her luminescent skin glowing brightly with excitement. We've had a breakthrough, she announced, sitting down with them. Our hybrid treatment combining human blood platelets with Luxerin regenerative enzymes has accelerated bone healing by 300% without sacrificing quality. That's amazing, Lyra said. How are the patients responding? The 5 volunteers are already walking, Senna said. Normally, our kind would require months of immobility for similar fractures. As they discussed the medical details, Ethan noticed a group of young aliens from different species playing together near a fountain. Among them was a human child, the daughter of one of the Earth diplomats who had recently brought his family to the station. The children were playing a game that involved running and dodging. When one Voltar child fell and scraped his knee, the human girl helped him up. The Voltar child seemed more curious about the injury than upset by it. Look, Ethan said quietly, pointing to the children. That's the future right there. Lyra and Senna turned to watch. The younger generations will adapt more easily, Senna observed. They don't carry the same preconceptions. As they watched, a heated argument broke out on the other side of the garden. An older Cerevian was loudly criticizing a younger one about reckless human practices and disrespect for our ancestors' wisdom. And that's the challenge, Lyra sighed. Cultural change never comes easily. Ethan nodded thoughtfully. The next few years would be difficult as species that had valued safety and longevity above all else learned to see value in resilience through recovery. But watching the children play, he felt hopeful. The future would find a balance between the alien way and the human way, taking the best of both approaches. 1 year after humans first arrived at the Galactic Council Station, a special ceremony was held. The Grand Hall was decorated with symbols from all Council species, including Earth's blue and green flag. Ethan stood near a window, watching ships come and go outside the station. At 43, he felt older than when he had first arrived, but also more purposeful. The last year had been challenging but rewarding. "There you are," Lyra said, joining him by the window. In the past year, their professional relationship had grown into something more. They had discovered that they worked well together, thought alike, and genuinely enjoyed each other's company. "Just getting some quiet before the ceremony," Ethan replied with a smile. "Nervous about your speech?" "A little. I've never been good at formal events." The ceremony was to mark the official establishment of the Interspecies Medical Exchange, a new council institution dedicated to combining the medical knowledge of all member species. Ethan had been asked to speak as one of its founders. "You'll do fine," Lyra assured him. "Just tell them what you've told me many times, that different paths can lead to the same destination." The hall filled quickly. Representatives from 27 species took their seats. In the front row sat the original aliens Ethan had met when he first arrived: Ambassador Krell, Senna, and High Commander Dres. The council speaker opened the ceremony with formal words of welcome. Various dignitaries spoke about the importance of the new medical exchange. Then it was Ethan's turn. As he walked to the podium, Ethan remembered his first days on the station, when the aliens had pitied humans for their short lives. How much had changed since then. 1 year ago, he began, "I stood in this hall as aliens explained to me how unfortunate humans were to live such brief lives. Today, I stand here to celebrate how much we have learned from each other." The audience was quiet, listening carefully. "Humans don't live as long as many of you," Ethan continued, "but we experience life intensely. We heal quickly, we adapt rapidly, and we face challenges head-on. Your species live longer, heal more perfectly, and build societies that value stability. Both approaches have value." He gestured to the medical team seated nearby, a mix of humans and aliens working together. The new medical exchange isn't about humans teaching aliens or aliens teaching humans. It's about finding a middle path that takes the best from all our species. After Ethan finished his short speech, High Commander Dres approached the podium. The commander looked different now, still proud and strong, but somehow more open. "When humans first arrived," Dres said, his voice carrying through the hall, "I believed their short lives made them lesser beings. I was wrong." The audience murmured in surprise. Voltaire rarely admitted error. "In the past year, I have watched humans face disease, injury, and challenge with remarkable spirit. I have seen them recover and continue. And I have learned that counting years is not the same as living fully." Dres turned to face Ethan directly. "In recognition of what humans have taught us about resilience, the Voltaire Empire wishes to present Ethan Hayes with our highest honor." An aide brought forward a medallion on a chain. It was made of a strange metal that seemed to shift and flow. "This medal has only been given to warriors who have served for over 300 years, Dres explained as he placed it around Ethan's neck. "But you, human, have experienced more life in your 43 years than many of our warriors have in centuries." The ceremony continued with other presentations and speeches. Afterward, during the reception, Ethan and Lyra found themselves surrounded by young aliens asking questions about Earth. A small Cerevian child tugged at Ethan's sleeve. "Is it true you almost died 3 times?" she asked, her crystalline eyes wide with curiosity. Her parents looked horrified at the question, but Ethan just laughed. "More than 3 times, he answered kindly. "Each time taught me something important." "Will you tell me about one of your near-death adventures?" the child asked eagerly. As the parents apologized for their daughter's questions, Ethan smiled. This was why he had stayed on the station instead of returning to Earth. The younger generations of aliens were learning to see life differently, not just as something to be preserved, but as something to be lived fully, whatever its length. "I'd be happy to tell you," Ethan said to the child. "Life is meant to be shared after all, no matter how long or short it might be."